It's very hard to establish. Listen, at this point, I think they're trying to end up with as high a pick as they can. It doesn't make any sense to me trading Pritchard and Flacco. And, I know that the Bengals were upset that they traded him in the division, but why wouldn't they? That means they lose another game when they play them.
Because Jimmy Haslam loves Deion Sanders, and I love it that Haslam loves Deion. They did have a big dinner with Shedeur and Deion before the draft, and if Shedur's ever going to get a shot here, it's only because Jimmy Haslam steps in and puts his foot down, and he's going to probably have to fire Stefanski because Stefanski is now saying, over my dead body will Shedeur get a shot with this year's Cleveland Browns. He fears his father. He fears Deion. This was Kevin Stefanski pretty much declaring public war on Shedeur, or at least Cold War on Shedeur. He won't even speak Shedeur's name in these interview sessions. It's like Parcells when T.O. was there. He wouldn't even call his name. He just called him the player. Remember that? Every time he's asked about Shedeur, he just plays dodgeball. He's saying, I've got to keep Shedeur out of the way because he can't play. That's what he's saying. I don't want to get him anywhere near a chance to be even the number 2 quarterback because he doesn't deserve to play on my team this year. And he had dug in before the draft, and shameful.
We need to talk about what's happening in Cleveland right now because this has turned into total chaos. Shadur Sanders is up in New York, and there's something strange going on. We're only getting these short 7-second clips of him warming up. Barely any footage, barely any access. We have to ask ourselves why. Why is one of the most talked about quarterback prospects being treated like he's some kind of secret the Browns don't want people to know about? Then we've got former Browns CEO Joe Banner from 2012 to 2013 coming out and exposing the entire organization. When we heard what he said, we had to listen to it multiple times because it confirmed everything we've been thinking. This man said straight up that the Browns are tanking. He's not hiding it. He said they're trying to get as high a draft pick as they can get. Trading Amari Cooper, trading Joe Flacco to a division rival, it doesn't make sense unless you're trying to lose games on purpose. But here's where it gets really interesting. The CEO said something that caught our attention. He mentioned that there's a lot of talk about Sanders, and we could hear the tension in his voice. There's something happening behind the scenes that nobody's talking about publicly. When we look at how they're limiting Shedeur's exposure, how they're throwing Dylan Gabriel into impossible situations, how they're not giving this man a fair shot, it starts to look less like a rebuild and more like they're setting him up to fail.
They can't get the benefit of his talent versus the young guys. I mean, they're doing the right thing and seeing if either the young quarterbacks have what it could take or they just have to pick somebody this year. I don't think either of them have what it takes, in my opinion. By the way, I know there's a lot of talk about Sanders. And listen, they could lose all 5 of their offensive linemen at the end of the season. I'll decide they're not good enough. And they just had a draft that, at least in Cleveland, was covered as a great draft without picking one offensive lineman, even at the end of the draft, to possibly develop. I just don't understand. I mean, that's just a way off-base team-building philosophy. So
Stefanski doesn't want Deion's presence hanging over his team. After all, once Shedeur starts, primetime becomes part of Cleveland's story, and not every coach wants that spotlight. Still, time is running out. The offense isn't producing. The fans are getting restless, and every national show seems to be talking about Shedeur more than the Browns' actual starters. This kind of attention can't last forever. The more the team fights against it, the more they look like they're scared of what happens when Shedeur gets his chance. Because if he plays well, they'll have to explain why he wasn't playing all along. At its core, this is about more than football. It's about fairness, opportunity, and the difficult politics that come with celebrity lineage. Shadur Sanders isn't asking for special treatment. He's asking for a chance. And the louder the fan base gets, the harder it becomes for the Browns to keep him quiet. Let's talk about Dylan Gabriel for a second, because we actually feel bad for the kid. They threw him out there, and look, we were some of the first people saying the Browns were going to tank when that first game happened. But what they're doing to Dylan is almost criminal. They're putting a young quarterback with limited NFL experience behind one of the worst offensive lines in football, with no real weapons against defenses that are coming after him every single snap. That's not evaluation, that's sacrifice. They're using him as a human shield while Shedeur sits and watches. And here's what bothers us about this whole thing. The former CEO called it out directly. He said they could lose all 5 of their offensive linemen at the end of the season, and the organization has decided they're not good enough. But at the same time, he mentioned that Cleveland was treating their recent draft like it was amazing, and they didn't pick one offensive lineman. Not one. Not even at the end of the draft to develop for the future. He called it way off-base team-building philosophy. And honestly, that's being nice about it. You know what that tells us? It tells us that Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry are so locked into their own plan, so sure they're the smartest guys in the room, that they can't see what's really happening. They're watching Shadur Sanders generate more excitement in warm-ups than their entire offense has generated all season. And instead of using that energy, instead of building around it, they're trying to control the story. They're trying to keep him in the shadows because his presence shows how badly they failed.
I think Stefanski is actually a good coach. I don't think he's a great coach. I think he's a good coach, but he's had 6 years now. I think Andrew Berry is a smart, hardworking, good guy. But I think he's had a fair chance to really demonstrate that they can build a roster that, if they fix the quarterback problem, can go a long way. I don't think they're there yet either. I think the defense is a BB plus. I don't think it's an A either. But it's a very good defense. It's in the top, maybe third of the defenses in the league. So I don't know. To me, they got to get back to basics. They got to make some front office changes.
Now let's get into this footage situation, because this is where things get really suspicious. We're getting these tiny little clips of Shedeur, right? 7 seconds here, maybe 10 seconds there. We can barely see him throwing. We can't hear what he's saying. We can't get a real feel for how he's doing. And multiple people have pointed out that it seems like the Browns are blocking access to him. They're not letting cameras get close. They're not letting reporters film his warm-ups the way they normally would with other players. And if that's true, if they're actually limiting footage of Shadur Sanders because they're afraid the hype gets too big, that's one of the most insecure moves we've ever seen from an NFL team. Think about what that means. That means Kevin Stefanski and his staff are so worried about the pressure that comes with Shadeur's popularity, so concerned about the fan base demanding he play, that they'd rather hide him than let things happen naturally. That's not confidence, that's fear. That's a coaching staff that knows they're in trouble, knows they don't have the answers, and is desperately trying to buy time. Because the second Shadur gets real playing time, the second he shows what he can do on an NFL field, the conversation changes completely. Suddenly, it's not about whether Dylan Gabriel can develop or whether Jameis Winston is the veteran presence they need. It becomes about why they waited so long to play the guy everybody actually wants to see.
And I'm excited, man. Hopefully we see Shedeur play today. I know everybody is in the community. They're playing up in New York. The Jets is not a very good football team. Let me see what is. I think the Jets might have only won one game, bro. So a lot of people were saying, like, this is going to be a bailout game for Dylan.
Joe Banner also talked about Kevin Stefanski. He said, and let's quote him here, "I think Stefanski is actually a good coach. I don't think he's a great coach." Listen to how he worded that. He's not saying Stefanski is terrible. He's saying he's reached his limit. 6 years in Cleveland, and what do they have to show for it? One playoff win, a roster that's been torn apart, a locker room that's completely down. At some point, we have to call it what it is. Good isn't good enough in the NFL, especially when you're wasting incredible talent on defense and refusing to fix the one position that matters most. And then he goes after Andrew Berry, too. He says he's a smart, hardworking, good guy. But has he built a roster that can compete if they fix the quarterback problem? The CEO doesn't think so. And that's brutal because Berry's the one making these draft decisions, making these trades, building this foundation. If a former executive who understands the business side is saying Berry's had a fair chance and hasn't delivered, what does that tell us about where they're headed? Here's our theory on what's really happening. We don't think the Browns are tanking for a quarterback in 2026. The CEO himself said there's nobody really good coming out. Arch Manning's situation is uncertain, and outside of him, the class looks weak. So what are they doing with all these picks? We think they're collecting assets for trades. They're going to try to package these picks to move up, or they're going to try to trade for established players, or they're going to make some big move that makes them look smart without actually fixing the real problems. But here's where Shedeur throws a wrench in their plans. If Shedeur plays well, if he shows he's the real deal, suddenly they don't need to make those moves. Suddenly the pressure is on to build around him, to admit they were wrong about the timeline, to change the entire strategy. And for guys like Stefanski and Barry, who've been preaching patience and process, that's a hit to their ego they're not ready to take. So what do? They slow things down with him. They keep the hype under control. They hope Dylan Gabriel shows just enough to justify keeping Shedeur on the bench a little longer. It's manipulation. It's politics. And the former CEO saw it coming from a mile away because he's been in those rooms. He's seen how organizations protect themselves over doing what's right for the team. This Jets game is a critical moment. New York is sitting at 1-8. They're terrible. Their offense can't score. Their defense is exhausted. Their coaching staff is about to get blown up. This is literally a perfect game for Dylan Gabriel. If there was ever a spot for him to go out there and have a decent performance to buy himself more time, this is it. But here's the thing. What happens when he struggles? What happens when the Browns lose to one of the worst teams in the football? At what point does Kevin Stefanski's pride take a back seat to reality? Because the fans are done. Cleveland fans have been patient, they've been loyal, they've supported this team through decades of pain. And now they're being told that the most exciting quarterback prospect they've had in years is sitting on the bench while they lose to the Jets? That's not going to work. The pressure is building, and Stefanski knows it. The CEO made another point that we think gets overlooked. He said the Browns' defense is top third in the league, maybe a B+ or an A-. And honestly, he's right. Myles Garrett is a monster, the secondary has playmakers, they're keeping games close despite the offense doing absolutely nothing. But here's the problem. How long is that going to last? How many times can you ask your defense to be elite when your offense can't stay on the field? That's the tragedy of this Cleveland situation. They have pieces, they have talent, they have a foundation on one side of the ball, but the stubbornness, the ego, the refusal to make the obvious move with Shedeur is costing them wins and costing them respect. And the longer it goes on, the worse it gets. The former CEO is basically saying what a lot of insiders are thinking but won't say publicly. Stefanski is not the guy. He's had his chance, he's shown what he can do, and it's not enough. His play calling is predictable, his adjustments are slow, and most importantly, he doesn't have the vision to see what's right in front of him. Shadur Sanders is a gift. He's a ready-made franchise quarterback with NFL pedigree, elite processing skills, and the kind of confidence that can change a culture overnight. But instead of embracing that, Stefanski is treating him like a threat. And that is what jealousy looks like. It's not the loud, obvious kind. It's the quiet kind where a coach who's supposed to be desperate for answers finds one and then makes excuses for why it's not the right time. It's the kind where the organization limits a player's exposure because they're afraid the spotlight's shifting. It's the kind where ego matters more than winning.
So what happens next? Well, if the Browns lose to the Jets, the pressure reaches a boiling point. The fans riot, the media crushes them, and Kevin Stefanski's seat gets hotter than it's ever been. At that point, they have two choices. They can continue to play Dylan Gabriel and hope he magically turns into something he's not, or they can rip the Band-Aid off and give Shedeur the keys. But here's why we're still optimistic about Shedeur. The truth always comes out. We can only hide greatness for so long before it demands to be seen. And when Shedeur finally gets his shot, when they can't justify keeping him on the bench anymore, he's going to prove all the doubters wrong. Because talent wins, preparation wins, confidence wins. The former CEO said something else that stuck with us. He said they need to get back to basics, make front office changes, and dominate the lines. And that's true. But you know what else they need? They need to stop being afraid of their own potential. They need to stop letting pride get in the way of progress. They need to put Shedeur Sanders on that field and let him cook. Because right now, that's the only path forward that makes any sense. When a former CEO who's been in the building, who understands the politics, who knows how these decisions get made, comes out and basically says the organization is tanking while mismanaging their most important asset, we have to pay attention. That's not speculation. That's someone with insider knowledge confirming what we've all been seeing. Kevin Stefanski needs to swallow his pride, admit that his evaluation of the quarterback situation was wrong, and give Shadur Sanders the opportunity he deserves. Andrew Berry needs to stop collecting picks for phantom trades and start building an actual offensive line. And the entire front office needs to stop treating Shadur like he's some kind of problem to be managed and start treating him like he's the solution they've been desperately searching for. Because at the end of the day, that's what he is. Shadur Sanders isn't the issue. The issue is an organization that's so broken, so paralyzed by fear and ego that they can't see the answer even when it's warming up right in front of them.